Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This is going to be my new Mandalorian Season 2 Grogu Emperor Palpatine video. Everyone wondering what's the connection between those two characters. He's so powerful, of course he heard Grogu's Jedi beacon at the end of episode 6. You also have all of Moff Gideon's cloning, which seems very similar to what Palpatine was doing in the Star Wars movies. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We're doing a giveaway for Disney Plus memberships. There's also going to be a very special presentation for all the brand new Star Wars live-action stuff that they're doing with Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and the larger universe they're creating through the Disney Plus series. That'll be happening later today, so of course I'll be doing videos for that as well, in addition to my regular Season 2 Episode 7 video this week. But after the last few episodes of The Mandalorian, everyone was wondering what the connection was between Grogu and Emperor Palpatine, because Grogu is so powerful, and if Moff Gideon is that interested in him, of course Palpatine long-term would be interested in him as well, and he would have known that he was at the Jedi Temple, so it wasn't like Grogu was a total secret. He was just another Jedi Padawan like all the other ones at the temple. So Tano answered a lot of those questions for us, thankfully kind of explaining where he fits into the Star Wars prequel timeline. He's about the same age as Anakin Skywalker, it's just that he showed up at the Jedi Temple at the traditional age you would normally show up, when you were very, very young. You just have to picture a much tinier version of Grogu. It's hard to say how much he grew those first couple of years, but he's 50 years old, so he'd already been at the Jedi Temple for a couple of years when Anakin Skywalker showed up with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Also, after witnessing all of Moff Gideon's failed cloning experiments, people are starting to wonder if there is a connection to Palpatine's cloning experiments with all the Snoke clones in the Star Wars movies. The whole thing with that is it's a big Dark Empire comic book Easter egg. If you didn't read those, in the Dark Empire comics, Palpatine was trying to create clones of himself because he wanted contingency plans. That was just one of his many backup plans. Should he die, he would just transfer his Force spirit to another one of his younger clones. During the movies, he claims he literally created Snoke, but during some of the expanded novels around the movies, they basically explained that Snoke and Palpatine sensed each other from across the galaxy early on, so what probably happened is that he learned about Snoke, then started using him to perfect the cloning process of making Force-sensitive clones for himself, so that once he did jump into another clone, the clone body would actually be able to hold his Force essence without completely burning itself out. The whole thing with Grogu's Force beacon after episode 6 he sent through the galaxy is that Emperor Palpatine would be one of those people powerful enough to sense that even as far away as the unknown regions, which is where he currently is in a semi-living state right now. So he is clocking Grogu from afar. During this whole period though, he only seemed like he was dormant. He's mostly just setting the stage for his big return about 25 years later. The reason why he waited that long is just because it's taking that long to build the Final Order fleet with all those Sith troopers. The whole thing with Force-sensitive clones, though, they kind of get into this in a lot of the expanded material and all the other books, is that there's something about midichlorians that makes it fundamentally almost impossible to clone someone who's Force-sensitive in a perfect way. There always winds up being some sort of genetic defect, or the clones wind up going insane. This is also a big heir to the Empire Easter egg for George Caboth. If you didn't read the Thrawn trilogy of books from back in the 90s, they're amazing. I would recommend checking them out. They're slowly recanonizing a lot of that stuff. Thanks to Dave Filoni, give him a big tip of the hat. There's all this stuff with cloning Force-sensitive people going on in the new Mandalorian episodes as well as the new Star Wars movies. They did that during the Thrawn trilogy, starting with Heir to the Empire. Thrawn wants to use a Jedi Master, but learns that he is a clone. The clone winds up going crazy just because of genetic defects. But also we find out one of the Emperor's contingency plans is that he used Luke's severed hand from Empire Strikes Back to create a full-blown clone of Luke Skywalker and use him against the real Luke. They wind up fighting each other. They reference a little of this during The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 4 with them trying to clone Force-sensitive people, where Dr. Pershing is talking about injecting Grogu's blood with its high midichlorian count into human test subjects, the cloning subjects that you see in the tanks. But because of all the problems with trying to clone midichlorians, you see all these broken, misshapen, Snoke-looking creations. So of course a lot of people had wondered, with all this Force-sensitive cloning, if Grogu was just a clone of Yoda. There's a couple reasons why Grogu isn't a clone of Yoda. One, because he was born long before Yoda died and trained at the Jedi Temple for years before Anakin Skywalker showed up. Yoda would have known him during that period, Yaddle too, because Yoda would have had a vested interest in seeing his species survive. Like the Jedi normally weren't allowed to marry and have children, but Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, for instance, came from a race that was extremely low in population, so the Jedi Order made an exception for him, allowing him to have multiple wives so that his species could continue. So that same would have been true for Yoda. Like, find as many of my species around the galaxy as you can, because there aren't that many of us. Make all the Yoda, Yaddle, harem jokes that you want. I'm sure they'll probably never fully explain that, just because George Lucas is always so protective of the Yoda character, and Dave Filoni wants to honor that. So I don't think they have any intention of over-explaining that part of Yoda's history. But the other reason why Grogu isn't a clone of Yoda is because after Season 1, Episode 3, when we saw Dr. Purging testing him on the biobed with a medical droid from A New Hope, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni said that he was not a clone. They also referenced that during the actual episode as well. There's no evidence of him being a clone.
I think it might be a strand cast.
I don't think it was engineered. I've worked in the gene farms. This one looks evolved.
That was also the episode where Dr. Purging took the blood samples that he referenced during Season 2, Episode 4. He said that they were only able to take a little without killing him because, physically, he's just so tiny, he doesn't have that much blood on him. At the end of Episode 6, when Moff Gideon has the stormtroopers stun him and put him in those tiny handcuffs, they're on their way back to another lab so Dr. Purging can drain him again, like a vampire. That's why he says, "Tell Dr. Purging, we have our donor," so that they can continue their cloning experiments. A lot of people also thought after Episode 4 and then after Episode 6 that the whole cloning plot also had something to do with Moff Gideon trying to make himself Force sensitive. Like, could you take the DNA from someone who was very powerful in the Force, like Grogu, and combine it with someone else's DNA to make them Force sensitive? It's totally possible that's one of his side goals, but I don't think that's his main goal with this cloning plot. I think it's a lot like the Dark Trooper storyline. He's trying to create a new army that he can control more easily, like the clones from Attack of the Clones in the Kamino facility, because Dr. Purging's uniform literally has the Kamino emblem on it. And he's probably trying to enhance these clones any way that he can, like making them Force sensitive. The Dark Troopers are kind of a version of that, but in the Dark Forces video game where they're pulling this stuff from, there were various versions of them each time with new phases, getting upgrades, making them more hardcore. Like, they start out looking a little more like regular droids, but then they become more like cyborgs with human parts combined with droid parts to make them superior in battle. Just from a design perspective, it seems like the ones in the show are somewhere between Phase 1 and Phase 2 troopers. But the Dark Troopers are not Moff Gideon's only long-term plan, they're just part of it. The cloning stuff also probably has a couple different goals, and like I said, they are pulling a lot of Easter eggs from the Thrawn trilogy, because now we have Grand Admiral Thrawn. Moff Gideon is trying to bring the Empire back. They haven't confirmed whether or not he's directly working for Emperor Palpatine, or if he knows about all of Palpatine's long-term contingency plans. We just hear him say, "Long live the Empire," like he wants the Empire he knew, the old Empire, to continue. If you didn't read a lot of the newer books, after the Battle of Endor, when the Empire lost, the rebellion in the New Republic, which was in the process of forming, forced them to sign a treaty saying that they wouldn't ever try to come back. They would basically disband the rest of the Empire. After that, a bunch of rogue Imperial admirals rallied, tried to come back again. That resulted in the Battle of Jakku, which is the actual final battle of the Empire. Then during that, one of the other Imperial admirals staged a coup within the remnants of the Empire and took their fleet into the unknown regions to become the First Order. That was all separate from what Palpatine was doing, so not everyone within the Empire, even up at the higher echelons in the Admiralty, knew what Palpatine's plans were. So it stands to reason that Moff Gideon thinks all this stuff that he's doing is just his plan and Grand Admiral Thrawn's. But really, behind the scenes, Palpatine is just manipulating them from afar, letting them think that they're doing this for themselves, when really they're just setting the stage for his eventual return. That's why Palpatine probably knows about Grogu now, and why he isn't sending Sith agents like the Knights of Ren to go bring him back to Exegol, because he wants to see if Moff Gideon's cloning plan is successful, and it's much more efficient to let that play out, and if he's successful, just swoop in and steal all that research and benefit for himself. And you have to consider that the story that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are interested in telling through The Mandalorian and these new series are about new characters that they created, like Moff Gideon, Din Djarin, The Mandalorian, and Grogu. They didn't create Grand Admiral Thrawn, but he's also a newer character that hasn't been used in the movies, and he wasn't directly created by George Lucas like a lot of the other characters. He was created by Timothy Zahn for the Thrawn trilogy back in the 90s. That's why we probably won't see a ton of Palpatine stuff play out on the Mandalorian series, But in the way that Dave Filoni sort of used the final season of Clone Wars to tell a broader Revenge of the Sith storyline, like make the movies better, they're probably doing the same thing with the Mandalorian series, weaving it into the movie continuity, making the movies better by default, with Ahsoka Tano and all these other characters. They've kind of already done that with Grogu, weaving him into the prequel movies timeline, explaining how he could have been a Jedi Padawan at the temple at the same time as Anakin Skywalker. And when Ahsoka Tano tells us about Grogu's backstory, explaining how his memory went dark after a mystery Jedi or a mystery person rescued him before Order 66, memory manipulation is a very powerful Force technique. They call it Force Rub. The biggest time you see it used in the canon is during the Clone Wars Mortis arc, when the father uses it on Anakin Skywalker to erase his memory of his future destiny as Darth Vader after the son, the living aspect of the dark side of the Force, spoiled him on it. Big spoiler alert, you're going to wind up killing most of the Jedi Order pretty soon. So it's possible that whoever rescued Grogu used that on his mind to erase his memories of all those events. And it's not an exclusive light side or dark side ability, so I've seen a lot of theories that the person who rescued him could have been a dark side or a Sith Force user, in addition to some of the more common Jedi theories. I do think that the show is going to reveal who it was that saved him, but they don't seem like they're in a big rush to do that, and it might not necessarily be the Jedi that shows up to answer Grogu's beacon. But I am expecting that Jedi who answers his beacon to actually be teased in the Season 2 finale, even if we don't actually see them on screen. An early prediction, it will probably wind up being another newer character that we haven't seen in live action before, like one of the animated characters coming into live action. It would be amazing to see Mace Windu or a version of Luke Skywalker show up, because logically Luke Skywalker should hear the beacon. But I think it's more likely that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau will use the opportunity like they've done in the past to introduce new stuff, like Ezra Bridger is at the top of my list, but there's also characters like Kyle Katarn because of all the Dark Forces Easter eggs with the Dark Troopers, there's Quinlan Vos, there's Cal Kestis from the Jedi Fallen Order game, or they could just wind up creating someone completely new. Let me know in the comments though, do you think that Moff Gideon's cloning experiments is directly related to Emperor Palpatine's cloning experiments? Do you think he's secretly working for him long term? And do you think that the Jedi who's going to show up to answer Grogu's call will be one of the animated characters, or do you think they'll be somebody from the movies, or even the Expanded Universe Legends canon? My full Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 7 video will post tomorrow just like normal, and there's also a really big Disney investor presentation later today for a bunch of new Star Wars and Marvel live-action series that they're doing, so I'll do a video for all of that stuff as well. Everyone click here for my full Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 6 video, and click here for my brand new Grogu Luke Skywalker video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, this is the way.